Choc sismique qui a mis 4 joueurs au sol.
Le triple kill de Choyobi.
Super.
It doesn't really find what he was looking for though. Choico in his fast speed. It's huge. C'est pas chaud,
So you're probably wondering, how did the San Francisco Shock end up in this position? Throughout the Overwatch League sophomore season, we have seen some incredible upsets. The Seoul Dynasty finally defeated NYXL in the Stage 1 playoffs. The Atlanta Reign took down Jonak and the Excelsior not once, but twice. The Outlaws bested the Stage 2 champs in San Francisco. And the Valiant ended the Vancouver Titans' 19-game winning streak. Yet no upset may be as impactful as the Chengdu Hunters following in the footsteps of the Houston Outlaws and finding a way to defy the odds against the Shock. While the Hunters have been fan favorites for quite some time due to their wacky multi-DPS wrecking ball strategies, they never quite managed to overcome a top-tier squad such as the Titans or NYXL, although they came close. But now, that all has changed. And so you might be wondering, how did they do it? The first map in the series, Ilios, is a microcosm of the match as a whole. On Lighthouse, the Shock were able to play their game, cycle ultimates, and force the Hunters into making mistakes. To begin, the Hunters let Shock take control of the objective until they found a good opening to swarm the point. Shock anticipated a fairer multi-DPS comp from the Hunters, and ran Violet on Moira to provide copious amounts of healing and the ability to fade away from trouble. However, as soon as he falls to a direct rocket, the Hunters overwhelm the Shock with focus fire and their burst.
A lot of percentage in the process.
Yeah, can't let your Moira die there to Jinmu right off the bat, so.
Right here, the Hunters are in great shape. They got a lot of ultimate charge in the first fight and are going to have Barrage, EMP, and Valkyrie online to be able to hold. Here is where the Shock start forcing the Hunters to play their game and force a ton of mistakes. Mistakes that will cost them the whole round. Jinmu presses Q to respawn with the Barrage finding no value. Violet uses the Coalescence, a relatively low-value ultimate, and manages to break line of sight of the Hunter's EMP. Elsa uses Self-Destruct, which manages to keep Violet and Rascal from advancing onto the point for a couple of seconds, as Evital resurrects Jinmu. The Hunters have now used up all of their resources. Aming has used the Minefield, and Evital has used Valkyrie. The Shock are able to flip the point having just used a Coalescence, and by the time the dust has settled, Violet is more than halfway to another one. The Shock are holding the point and have their ultimates ready. Amazingly, despite only having 18% of the point and playing catch-up in that regard, they're actually miles ahead. What's more, the Hunters are running Kyo onto Ana and lack a defensive ultimate like Sound Barrier or Transcendence, making any retake all the more difficult and ensuring that Sinatra's EMP will have little resistance. In the final fight, while Sinatra did EMP second, his ultimate got more value than Yang Xiaolong's, because Moth was able to hide with the Sound Barrier. This was San Francisco forcing the Hunters to play right into their hands. Moving on to Well, the Shock managed to pick up an early 52% while running their Baptiste Goats variant. The Hunters are pushing onto the point with what can only be described as Orisa Goats. As Sinatra is off to the side firing high-charged right clicks, he clearly overstays his welcome as the Hunters collectively pounce him. But a well-timed halt keeps him from retreating, and the Shock invest Transcendence and Rascal's Immortality Field to keep Sinatra alive. Now, everything in the kitchen sink gets popped from both sides. All because the Hunters tried desperately to confirm a kill onto Sinatra, and the Shock responded with everything in their power to keep him alive. Choi Hyobin's self-destruct ends up winning the fight for his team, but not after nearly everything was used by both sides. In the wake of this fight, there are two very key ultimates to look at. Violet is 25% from yet another Transcendence, and Yang Xiaolong is similarly close to his Graviton. Because the two can cancel each other out, the ult economy for both teams has been reset. The Shock can no longer cycle their ultimates. As Yang Xiaolong's grab gets countered with the Transcendence, the Shock have now accumulated 99%. On the verge of victory, and with Moth's kill onto Jinmu and Aming falling, they are in a 6v4. This is where heroes need to be born. Evital's boop kill onto Super and Violet removes all shielding from the Shock as well as a ton of extra firepower. Notice also the ult charge that he gains. Aming's able to get back onto the point with Ball's high mobility, and the Hunters manage to secure the point. This is now where the Hunters force the Shock into overplaying and making mistakes. The Hunters are able to rotate and speed boost away from Super, who is equipped with a protective barrier and a repair pack. Choi Hyobin follows Super instead of peeling for Violet, who is now wide open for an assault by Aming and orbs by Kyo, who then confirms the kill and follows it up with another one onto Sinatra. The rest of the Hunters target the other Shock members who are isolated. A desperate Super tries for a charge kill on his way back and even attempts a shatter at half health. And while it does connect, there isn't any follow-up by his team who needed to back away and regroup. In the penultimate fight, Sinatra does a good job at kiting members of the Hunters towards him. He plans to have a grab on the wall so it doesn't get eaten, and then would have his team, mainly Choi Hyobin, follow up with a self-destruct. But Yang Xiaolong completely denies this by being the one to grab first. Sinatraa has no choice but to counter grab, and following that, Violet uses Transcendence. This is where Super's Earth Shatter could have come in very handy. With Sinatraa face to face with Aoming, he uses Minefield. Cho Hyobin self-destructs, however, they both end up dead. While the Hunters do invest both of their support ultimates to stay alive, they have survived the biggest threats and have yet again forced the Shock to overinvest and make mistakes. Moth, with a sound barrier that could be the key to retaking the point, tries to speed back to a spawn instead of dying and gets staggered. The same happens to Rascal. With the respawns out of sync for the Shock and time ticking down, there's not much more to do and the Hunters take well.
Zero credit to the Hunters.
Yeah.
They make a lot of swaps off of the McCree comp. And Eviltal, really the hero with that double environmental limb. And the Shock, they get sloppy.
Yeah.
The Hunters are holding onto the point, but the last fight traded their EMP and Transcendence for Sinatra's Grav. Here, the Shock are in a good position to retake. Both sides use Rally, but before Moth can benefit, he is taken out by Elsa onto Sombra. Rather than back out, the Shock decide to continue marching into enemy territory outnumbered. The kill onto Moth is critical, because it means they no longer have the support ultimate advantage. Not only that, but Lucio's speed is needed to pull off a hasty retreat. The Shock funnel into the cave area where they are forced to trance the Graviton. Since they can't fight the Hunters due to Aoming's minefield, they are now forced onto the point. Elsa recognizes that Super's Shatter is the Shock's win condition and hacks him, preventing him from ulting or shielding his team. Because of this, they fall, and there's nothing that he can do about it.
Fantastic for this point. You can see how much delay they can cause with EMP, with Graviton, with the Vine Field in these choke points. This is the point you do not want to face the Chengdu Hunters on. They started on the best point for San Francisco, but we're ending here on the best point for Chengdu.
Now, in the penultimate fight, the Hunters fight onto the Shock and play to execute Violet. Aoming initiates with Piledriver, forcing a repair pack onto Violet as well as a projected barrier. As soon as it expires, the EMP connects, bringing Violet down to 50 health, where he is quickly eliminated. Moth's sound barrier can't be cast fast enough, and Super Shatter gets negated by Transcendence. Sinatra's Grav gets denied by Evotal's beat, and with Super hacked, he falls yet again.
Anyway, the Grav might be able to make the difference with the sound barrier for Yveltal, keeping the Hunters standing. And now the Shock in big trouble. Super hacked again. No shield means no avoiding that damage. And the Hunters at 99%. Shock trying.
The Hunters constantly put the Shock into positions where they commit to a fight while down a player or come out on top when ults are exchanged. Compare this to how the Shock played Lighthouse. They never overinvested or played with abandon. Additionally, their individual performances were excellent. Aoming on Wrecking Ball made space for his team, Eviltal was able to find key boop kills to even fights, and Elsa scored opening frags and secured high-value hacks. On Eichenwald, the Hunters run a Sombra Ana Goats variant, the very same variant that worked so well for the Houston Outlaws. Through hacks and well-placed mayonnaise, the Hunters were able to make up for their skill differential, but there were also several key misplays by the Shock. Here, the Shock are able to win their fight on the back of Sinatra's EMP. Aoming has only just swapped onto Reinhardt, and Super goes all the way back to spawn to change off Winston. Cho Hyobin never fully retreats with his team as they wait for Super. This is where the Shock uncharacteristically get caught. He gets hacked by Elsa and provides him with a ton of ultimate charge. The Hunters don't even end up needing the EMP after dealing with Cho Hyobin's mech, and they manage to win out.
Struck EMP coming in now, actually, for Chengdu. They could sweep this.
Possibly. Super got knocked off the edge there. Jinmu with a big whip shot. That's huge. Wow, Sinatraa down as well. They're not even going to need the EMP.
No, that is massive that they're not going to need the EMP.
The Shock are not a team that makes a lot of mistakes, so capitalizing on these openings is super critical to having even a chance of winning. Later on the attack, now on point C, the Hunters force out another massive mistake. Aoming's Shatter knocks down Violet and the rest of the Shock fall in tandem. Kyo's Bionade connects with Cho Hyobin, Super, and Rascal. As soon as he's up from the Shatter, Violet pops Transcendence, but effectively wasting it. Now, in extra innings, the Hunters need to find a way to get the Shock off the point. Sinatraa hides in wait with his Graviton, but instead of being the first to act, Yao Xiaolong is. Cho Hyobin gets hacked, naded, and EMP'd while boosting through the members of the Hunters before he has to self-destruct to create space for his team. Both he and Rascal are forced inside the stone room to cover, where Aoming is able to swing and cleave at them. Soon after, the rest of the Shock fall.
For just a moment, but the Hunters coming in with all the kills, and this looks like where it's probably going to end. For Shock's overtime push, that's a two-man Shatter. Here comes the charge, and right into Moth. And Shock cannot sustain.
This indecisiveness ends up hurting the Shock. Had they grabbed first, Super could have taken a position to avoid a counter grab and connect with a charge kill onto one of the supports of the Hunters, leading to a fight win and further point progress. Instead, by grabbing second, the fight is prolonged and the Hunters are able to get the sound barrier and EMP online. Now let's take a look at the final few fights of Eichenwald to determine where it all went wrong. The Hunters' attack consisted of 3 fights. The first fight, a prolonged skirmish, features a ton of mistakes by the Shock. Just take a look at their ultimate usage. First, Violet used Transcendence as soon as it comes online, and Auming gets nano boosted. Rascal uses the Amplification Matrix shortly thereafter. With both Moth and Violet very low, Sinatra uses Grab as soon as it comes online. Are you noticing a pattern?
And here's the problem, Doa. Look at how much the Shock used.
With everything but self-destruct and sound barrier tapped, the call comes in to save the barrier for the next fight and let the Hunters take the point.
That's back right now, he gets hacked! He can't get back in! And there's the grab on top of everybody. Should be an easy point they take now. They're not gonna lose anybody.
Okay, well we know the answer. The decision was to save sound barrier. The call comes through from the Shock.
The final fight all comes down to using ultimates effectively and staying in position. The Shock need a way to deal with Elsa's EMP, and Moth and Violet have the tools to do this. The Shock take the high ground and prepare to contest together as a unit, probably once Sinatra either has Grab or is incredibly close to it. They want to take this fight on their terms. Here's Cuss's reaction when he reviewed this.
He wanted to go back here, but he went here, so he got caught in it. That's on Moth. And then he gets the fast shatter. Oh yeah, that's a yikes. Oh wow, that's huge. Maybe that's why Moth wasn't in the right spot, because of the boop. Wow, that's such a good boop. Wow, that's actually insane.
Yveltal straight up won this map for the Hunters. The boop forced the Shock off the high ground and they could never execute their plan how they wanted to, and more importantly, how they needed to. As such, everyone gets EMP'd, and yet again the Hunters did not allow the Shock to play the game that they wanted to. While the Hunters may have been outmatched in terms of individual raw skill, they didn't play passively and used the CC tools available to them to create space and win matchups, leading to yet another incredible upset in the history of the Overwatch League.
And now, a message from our sponsors. This video is brought to you by Insights, an all-in-one platform to elevate your team performance. Simply play, review, and strategize, all in real time. See why the pros use Insights to organize and review their gameplay. Get your free account today.